Hey everyone, so I'm going to be doing the Creative Conscious brief. And I've chosen that brief due to my own personal experiences with mental health and specifically eating disorders, so that's what I've chosen to really focus in on. So the question I've kind of posed here is, there's a lack of targeted support for those who are not teenagers or young adults for eating disorders. What can be implemented to support those aged 25 to 35 who are still / newly struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating? I've really chosen to narrow down into this age group of 25 to 35 because of the sudden lack of targeted information and support for those people. Obviously, the stereotype of who struggles with an eating disorder are teenage girls. So once you're kind of outside of that bracket and you're going on to adult life, the lack of support is really stark and obvious, and I can see from my personal experience and the experience of peers that this is something that really needs to be developed. I also think that it's important just to note that obviously those over 35 also really struggle. There's a huge amount of research being put into this at the minute of middle-aged people and even older than that who are struggling with eating disorders or disordered eating, but I specifically wanted to focus in on those 25 to 35 because of that sudden lack of support. So obviously that's my target audience, my primary target audience. However, I do hope that my outcome will be accessible for those older, or potentially be able to be developed on to be more inclusive of older people as well. So for my objectives and aims, I was really inspired by the Creative Conscious brief because of its repeated use of terms like community and personal relationships, and I think those things are really central to helping those people with eating disorders, like they are all mental health problems. So yeah, my objectives and aim: build a support system for those with eating disorders or disordered eating aged 25 to 35. Create an honest, safe space to discuss your thoughts or your emotions with trained pen pals who can give you advice. And this really comes from my own experience doing email counselling, which was extraordinarily helpful, but I feel like it just needed to be made that bit more accessible for people, and obviously that's been run through my personal email address, and I feel like that could be taken to an app which could open up a lot more possibilities. So the next point: create easy access for this age group to online counselling and provide signposts for those interested to find further information to support and enhance their recovery. I think that's really important, but I also don't think the app needs to be overly prescriptive because this is an older age group. It's not aimed towards teenagers who need that information. These people probably are more educated and just need help signposting them to good information that will help them. Okay, so for my next slide, I've decided to look at context. I'm not going to read all of these out, just kind of comment on the ones that I found really interesting. So obviously the first one talks about the amount of people seeking treatment in their 20s and 30s, which is really interesting and kind of backs up the age range I've chosen for my app. Nearly 80% of middle-aged respondents to a 2013 study reported purging, which is self-induced vomiting, misuse of laxatives or medication, during the previous 5 years. I found this one particularly shocking and not talked about at all. And I think, again, this really kind of proves this need for more support for people older than teenage or young adults. I've written here, half of young adults feel comfortable going online to look for support, which I think kind of backs up, again, the need for an app like this. Forums and Google aren't necessarily the most reliable sources for information, and I think a dedicated space for these people to go to is really important. In 2007, the NHS Information Centre stated that 6.4 of adults displayed signs of an eating disorder. I think this is a really good point and shows you how many people are struggling, and that was 13 years ago, so you can just imagine that has just risen since then, and again really proves the need for more targeted support for these people. So for this next slide, I'm just going to show some similar services and apps that are out there, because obviously I'm entering a market of mental health services and apps, and I think it's important to just kind of recognise what else is out there and what I'm bringing that's different, or what I'm planning to bring that's different. So these are two of the most popular, pretty much the only two, to be honest with you, other eating disorder apps that are out there, and they both have a very similar MO to them. They're basically logging apps that you can log your meals, photographs of your meals if you wanted to, and check in, as it kind of says there, on your emotions, and you can kind of rate your emotions and rate how you feel about eating that day, log any bad behaviours you've been doing, like skipping meals or purging your meals, and I think these are really important things that need to be there on an eating disorder app. However, I think these both have the same integral problem, which is that you are completely left to your own devices when using these apps. You have to motivate yourself to upload all the information and be on top of it, and I think that can be extraordinarily difficult. It's really hard when you're struggling with an eating disorder to actually log everything you're eating, and be faced with the reality of your eating habits. That's really difficult, and there's no support from these apps or people who look in at these apps or anything like that to motivate you to carry on logging your meals. And I think that is what really needs to change, and that is what I'm looking to create, is like this kind of mix between a diary app and a online counselling experience together. I think that's really important. So in this next slide, I've kind of written the plan, my plan of where I'm going and how to make this outcome successful, and on time. So first of all, I've written research. This is where I'm currently at, like researching primary research, which is obviously going to include interviewing people. I have a contact at an eating disorder charity that I will be interviewing on their opinion on what is needed and kind of their feedback on the app I'm creating or the service I'm creating, as well as contextual research. So the contextual research is kind of what I started a few slides back with the facts around what is going on, but I think there's a lot more contextual research to be done. So that's research. Then distill is just really about focusing back in on the specific problem that I have found, knowing everything I know now after the research section. So distilling that down and really understanding the essence of what I'm trying to look at. Then thirdly, test. So I'm going to need to test the idea in lots of different ways and get feedback. So if it's an app that I do end up creating, the testing of how the interface works, I've written there wireframing, like kind of the technical side of things, but also testing the idea out on asking people that I do know who have struggled with eating disorders, their opinions, and getting feedback is really, really important to, in my opinion, to create a successful product at the end. So then finally, outcome, I've written a robust, ready for market product. I really want to create something that is really just ready for somebody to pick up and take that to market, because I think this is a really strong, important idea that needs to be happening. So hopefully this might make a difference. So then for my final slide, I've just gone back and put in that question that I've started with, because I'm kind of starting to already distill this thing and work out really this is what I'm interested in. There's a lack of targeted support for those who are not teenagers or young adults for eating disorders. What can be implemented to support those aged 25 to 35 who are still struggling or newly struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating? And I've written there an app, perhaps a diary style entry system which could be added to weekly or daily and is replied to weekly by a trained professional or charity support volunteer to help work through and unpack how you're feeling week by week and support your recovery. That's kind of the idea that I'm running with at the minute. I think definitely there's a lot of room for things to change as I'm in this research period, but the app is something that's really accessible and really easy for people to use, and people would want to use it as well, because of the kind of privacy that an app would bring compared to online counselling. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and I'd love to hear people's feedback. Thank you.